The problem for Democrats is since they believe that liberalism is a self evident truth, they can't understand how they could have lost the. Well, look, over the last decade, they've lost thousands of seats nationwide. In Idaho, nearly 85% of all elective seats, that's at local, county, and state level, are held by Republicans. The libs can't understand how they've gotten to this point because, golly gee, what we do and what we practice and what we preach, everyone should think that. So, therefore, there must be something sinister going on. Fake news, Russians, global warming, whatever is causing people out there to lose their minds and vote for Republicans, don't you know? Because everybody in America, every grown man would like to go pee next to a little girl in a public bathroom, after all. Because we do. They think that you are just as much a pervert as they are. And they can't understand why you don't vote for more infanticide, for more shared potties and locker rooms, or why you don't vote for forcing cake bakers to participate in same-sex marriages and whatever else may follow. Welcome to the boudoir. 9:35. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX at newsradio1310.com. Meanwhile, all of you dumb dummies out there in flyover country, you voted for jobs and the economy and the future. Wouldn't it be nice if Lefty would forget about all of the excuses and we could get to work on some of these other pressing issues? Business Insider. This is what we really have to be concerned about. A writer by the name of Akin, and I believe he pronounces the last name Odili. He has some charts and things I can't show you. I can hold them up to the microphone, but being a radio, it's not going to do us a lot of good. The chart, though, he says, shows the Investors Intelligence Advisor sentiment reading on the S&P 500. The difference between bullish and bearish investors is approaching a danger zone seen near previous market tops. The annotations he mentions come from a researcher that he's been looking into who actually does some of the data mining on all of this. Among the indicators that say this can't continue, the most important is whether the U.S. economy is entering a cyclical downturn. Other strategists warn that the recent run-up has been a hope rally built on the prospects that Trump delivers his campaign promises of infrastructure spending, corporate tax cuts, and deregulation. And if he can't get this done because he's hampered by the fellow travelers in media who are just trying to game the system in hopes that they'll get brownie points from their fellow travelers in the Democrat Party, then we're all going to be in very serious trouble. Market Intelligence has this. This is from Fortune magazine. According to federal government records, a record 5,409 Americans renounced their citizenships in the year 2016, including nearly 3,000 in the final quarter of the year alone. That's a more than 26% increase from 4,279 who handed in their passports the year before. Now, did they do this because Trump was president? I'm going to go to Canada with Rosie O'Donnell and Al Sharpton, and then we're all going to sit around and use the little girl's potty there. No, the cause actually of the defections, according to Fortune, which led the U.S. to say so long last quarter to everyone, from Jonathan Abbas to Anna Werner, is primarily the U.S. tax system. No, say it ain't so. It's got nothing to do with the social issues. Mr. Trump says he's trying to change that, but he can't change it as long as he's got this albatross hanging around his neck, this weight that's placed there every day by the fellow travelers in the propaganda ministry over at the New York Times. A couple of other things on this, and this shows you that the public is much more attuned to his message than they are to the message of debauchery being promoted by the Democrats. Richard Berman, writing at the Washington Times today. A minimum wage hike resistance is growing. We're told that everybody out there ought to make $100 an hour, and that way everything will be fair. But in Barrington, Oak Forest, Rosemont, and Tinley Park, Illinois, they've opted out of Cook County essentially being the suburban area around Chicago. That's in Illinois for you liberals out there. They have opted out of the forthcoming $13 an hour starting wage. In California, Gilroy, Los Gatos, Morgan Hill, and Saratoga have opted out of Santa Clara County's speedy $15 minimum wage timeline. Other cities, towns, and villages in the country are following suit. What are these city leaders seeing that other states and localities have missed? It's the destructive effects of their neighbors' good intentions. There you go. That's an issue for people, not necessarily shared parties. How about this? The economist Peter Morici, also writing at Washington Times. Foreign governments rely more on value-added taxes, or VAT as they're known, which approximates a national sales tax. Those are rebatable on exports and applied to imports under World Trade Organization rules, whereas income taxes are not. This places U.S.-based businesses at a disadvantage. Businesses are making decisions for reasons of tax avoidance, not sound economics. Some move headquarters offshore to avoid U.S. taxes, robbing Americans of much-needed jobs. The most effective reform would be simply to junk the personal and corporate income tax in favor of a VAT. These are the issues we should be debating right now. And if we can get the liberals out of the business of Russia, the bathroom, locker room, and fake news, maybe we could get back to something important. 940, we'll call it, 37. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. More on some of these ridiculous issues coming up in just a couple of minutes. Here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Just a note, I mentioned Cook County, which is the county around Chicago, Illinois, and the push to have everybody pay a higher minimum wage there. Well, it draws in more of the SEIU crowd to help fund your campaigns. You get it? Yeah, you double their wage, and then you hope that the union will raise dues, and then the dues can be turned around and put into a political action committee to elect more Democrats, don't you know? And then those Democrats can also turn around and say, hey, look what I did for you. Oh, I know your company can't afford it. Oh, I heard they laid you off. Well, it must be the evil corporate titans once again. It can't simply be us, though, because we Democrats are looking out for you. Well, other than the Podesta brothers, who are making a lot of money off Russian banks. And Chuck Schumer, who's being funded by Goldman Sachs. Yeah. Well, okay. Pay no attention to all of that. 943. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We're at 36. Speaking of Chicago and the state of Illinois' state lawmakers are busy these days, according to Gerald Skoning, writing today at the Wall Street Journal, but not with trying to reform the pension system or improve Springfield's dismal bond rating. Springfield is the state capital. Instead, they're moving to designate October 2017 as Zombie Preparedness Month. Let that sink in for a moment. This may sound like a joke, but it's undeadly serious, he writes. A resolution adopted by the State House last month contends that, quote, while a zombie apocalypse may never happen, the preparation for such an event is the same as for any natural disaster, unquote. Residents are urged to create a stockpile of food, water, and other emergency supplies that can last up to 72 hours. It's common sense, isn't it? Other items to have on hand in case of marauding zombie hordes: medications, tools, electronics, sanitation and hygiene, clothing and bedding, important documents, and first aid. Which, if you're a member of the LDS Church, you've already got all that stuff in case there's some other sort of emergency. You know what's funny is we've had people call up this radio program and they've complained because Lance Clough proposed a bill to allow people to speed up when they pass folks on secondary two-lane roads, knowing that the public out there is annoyed and that we're trying to just make things more convenient for people, life more convenient. And the liberals here scream and yell about that sort of stuff going on. But nobody here on our state government is talking about designating October Zombie Apocalypse Month. And yet we criticize our own legislators. When you compare them to what's going on in other parts of the country, you realize there's a heck of a lot more sanity in Idaho than there certainly is in Illinois. The writer says what's really worrying about the state, and which is not being addressed, is happening right now. Illinois has gone 19 months without an annual budget, and the prospects are dim that the Democrat State House will pass one that the Republican governor can sign. Meanwhile, the state has amassed $11 billion in unpaid bills, predicted to climb to more than $27 billion before the end of the decade. Illinois is facing the worst pension crisis of any U.S. state, with unfunded obligations totaling $130 billion. According to the state's Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability, that amounts to about $10,000 in debt for each resident. No, they're going to be coming. They're like the Californians. They'll go to Washington and say, "You've got to bail us out." In other words, we want the people in all of the same states to bail us out. We're going to raise our minimum wage to $45 an hour and force all of the businesses that pay taxes out of the state, and then give out more food stamps that we can't afford. And we're going to have a zombie apocalypse month, but we want the rest of you to bail us out. That's what's coming. And all of these states that voted for Hillary Clinton, Illinois, California, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, as they all go swirling the drain, they're going to come and tell all of those states that voted for Donald Trump that we were wrong, but then they're going to ask us to pay their bills. 736-0300, the number to reach our program today. 736-0300. You're listening to Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air.
Bill, nobody gives a flying pig's fart about what's going on in Illinois. Let's talk about Idaho issues. Have a good day.
All right. What would you like me to talk about? Hello? For the mentally challenged who are listening today, I was just making a comparison about what's going on there with how we run government here. Did they not hear that? All right, Idaho issues. Well, earlier today I talked about roads. Yesterday I talked about roads. I just mentioned the speeding change so you can speed and pass people. What else? How are your crops doing here? I know it's only March. Hello? Hello? Oh, we talked about the fact that some counties in Idaho aren't going to be plowing roads in the future because they think it costs too much money. We did do that today. What are you doing for St. Patrick's Day? What's your favorite color? Caller? Still there? Hello? So our neighbors are spending themselves into oblivion, and they're going to be coming to us and asking us to pay their bills for them. How does that not impact your life? Anyone else would like to weigh in on that? 736-0300. 736-0300. How did he go so silent so fast? You know, when your IQ is your shoe size, give me a call and let me know, right? That's how it seems to work out there at the moment. I don't know. Maybe we could talk about the issue about the people who've actually been the victims of inbreeding in call radio programs. You're up next. You're on the air on Top Story with Bill Colley. Go ahead.
Well, I will try to be a little bit more intelligent on this matter. The fact is that if Illinois' economy is going to hell, they're going to have to look to someone to be able to help bail them out. And if Idaho has an economy that is working pretty well, chances are Illinois is going to be coming asking for us to help bail their sorry behinds out.
No, that's not difficult to put together, is it?
Not really. I guess all that education I got worked out, didn't it?
Yeah, I got mine too, and I graduated somewhere in the middle of my class. I can't admit the top, but thank you much for the telephone call. You're up next. You're on KLIX. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure, that's okay.
I just wanted to say about the thing that went on up in Boise at the State House, the protest against the state taking over these federal lands. Now, you know, there's a lot of scenic lands in Idaho, and there's a lot of hunting goes on in those scenic lands, and I don't have a problem with the withholding a bunch of this land the federal government has the idea they ought to lock it up, but on the other hand, there's a lot of land that could be used by the citizens of the state, and there's no reason for the federal government to be holding them. There's 100,000 acres in Jerome County that's served by infrastructure. I'm talking about interstate highways and railroads, and those that infrastructure runs right through a lot of federal lands. Now, for them to hold that land, which is non-scenic, I mean, it's just a lot of pile of rocks in most cases, and other cases, there's some nice land that could be used to provide jobs and economic activity. And there's a middle ground here. That's the way I look at it.
They had the rally Saturday. Oddly enough, I've had some people from that group on the air before here, even though we never actually talk Idaho issues. Some odd reason I booked them and we got them on the air to have a discussion about this. If they would have done it on a weekday, it would be more timely, and I'd spend more effort giving some thought to it. But I got thinking about their rally the other day, and I read the arguments in the newspaper and online that they were claiming if we do this, then they won't be able to go hunting and fishing. So what they're saying is the people who live, I don't know, in Idaho County or Camas County or some of these places that are impacted heavily by all of this, that they should go on living lives of poverty so that we can still go hunt and fish on their lands, that we shouldn't allow them to develop their lands and have a tax base because we like going out and looking at their poverty while we hunt and fish. In other words, it's a very selfish argument that they're making on the steps of the Capitol when they do this. And I do understand. I don't want the land turned over to those brothers from Texas who are buying up huge swaths of Montana and Idaho. I don't want them coming in here and putting up gates around everything. And there's the fear that will happen. But I just can't believe that anybody in Washington is necessarily smarter about land management than someone in Boise, because they're all either politicians or they're all either bureaucrats. So maybe the people actually living in Idaho have a better idea how to manage it. That's been my argument all along.
Well, and I talked to our representatives in one of those meetings up there the other day, and he told me, he says they won't allow that. The people in the east won't allow us to have management of these lands. And I said, why not? I said, that all east of the Mississippi, those states run all that land, all of their land in their state. And now you're telling me Idaho can't do it? That's nonsense.
Right. And the funny thing is that where most of the bureaucrats who make these decisions are based, there are very few federal lands. So they don't have to deal with that. They've got tax bases that are productive and useful. Again, well, we want to come to the West and look at the beautiful scenery. Okay, how about the people who actually have to live here? We're supposed to be, I guess, actors or reenactors to entertain them. Is that it? And remain poor because that way they can enjoy the scenery? It's a very selfish argument that's coming from that side of the country.
We absolutely. We need our tax base to be spread out so that it is so expensive for everybody. I just got done paying my taxes in Jerome County, and I thought, geez, this is a lot of money. Every year I got to come with that, and if there were more lands to spread that tax base out on, it would be cheaper.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of efficiencies that can be had.
Well said, and I thank you for the call. There's a proposal that's also making the rounds in Boise that we would turn Craters of the Moon, is it? I believe it's Craters of the Moon into a national park, even though it's got a national designation right now. And the argument is, from the legislator behind it, who would just like to be able to send a mailer home to the constituents and say, look what I did, vote for me. He's saying, well, it'll bring tourists here. Don't tourists already come here to see it? Why would you need to change the designation? And if you change the designation, does that give the federal government even more tentacles into how we do things here? Because then the federal government will say, well, gee, you're not actually on park land, but we see you're planning a building project, and that could have an impact on the park land, so therefore you can't build that. That's historically how this has worked. So this notion that we need to have a national park designation because therefore people will go, I'm sitting right now in the state of Maine, and I've been thinking I'd like to go to a national park this summer. I bet they've just designated Craters of the Moon a national park. Therefore, honey, get the kids together. We're going to Idaho. Well, if we already have it open to tourists, how's that going to change anything? That's, well, if you're the legislator who's proposing it, you'd like to be able to go home and tell your constituents you've actually been doing something for the money and benefits you're getting. And if you don't have anything else to show them, you can go home and claim that, right? And you can say, oh, it'll bring millions more people here beyond what we're already seeing. Somehow I don't know how that's going to happen. 9:56, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. This notion, and let me get back to that somehow somebody sitting in an office in Washington better knows how to manage the lands here than somebody sitting in an office in Boise. I've never been able to figure out what makes that guy in Washington smarter. But I do know that he doesn't have anything to do, and he doesn't have to do with the area immediately, and he doesn't have to eke out a living here on this front. He can actually sit back in an office in Washington making a big salary on your taxpayer dime, and he lives in a nice cushy house out in Northern Virginia, and he's got all sorts of shopping opportunities, all sorts of entertainment opportunities, none of which you get because you can't use the land that just is a couple of miles down the road from where you live. Once more, again, this country was founded on the notion that people would have local control over their resources, over their lives, and over how they were governed, and we've surrendered all of that. And all of these arguments that we would just go out there and we would destroy it if that happened. I go back to that movie, The Time Machine. Not the original, the cheesy original, but the remake of it, which was out about 15 years ago. And at the end of the movie, the hero of the film meets the albino, who's the guy who controls the minds of the Morlocks. Those are the animals that evolved from human beings, and he's allowing them to eat some of the human beings. But he says to the hero of the film, he says, if I wasn't here to control their minds, they'd exhaust the food supply in 6 months, meaning they'd go out and they'd eat every last human being, and then they wouldn't have anything left to eat. Your federal bureaucrats with control of the lands take that same attitude, that you aren't smart enough to govern yourself, and if you were allowed to do it, you'd go out there and you'd chop down all the forest and burn all of the wood and just pave it all over. Somehow I don't see that happening, but that's their attitude about you. 36 right now, coming up on news at 10 o'clock. From Fox, Rush Limbaugh will be along in just a few minutes. I think Rush is going to talk specifically about Idaho issues today. So hope you can stick around for that, too. God willing, and the creek don't rise. I'll be back here tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock. Otherwise, have a wonderful day.